Welcome to 5MI Truth or Myth, where you decide if someone's telling a sexual truth or a sexual myth. Today's truth or myth is about gender. As with most things sexual, people make gender way more complicated than it needs to be. With this being said, let's begin by simply defining gender and then distinguishing its definition from biological sexes and sexual orientations. Gender is the biological, psychological, and sociological characteristics associated with biological sex. Often, these characteristics are described as being masculine, feminine, or androgynous. Biological sex is the genes, hormones, or organs necessary for reproduction. When it comes to biological sex, all organisms are either sexual or asexual. Sexual organisms need another organism to reproduce, whereas asexual organisms can reproduce on their own. Thus, human beings biologically are sexual organisms. Sexual orientation is a person's attraction to gender. Often this attraction is described as bisexual, heterosexual, or homosexual. With this simple definition of gender in mind and its distinctions from biological sex and sexual orientation, let's see if you can determine if today's special guest is sharing a sexual truth or a sexual myth. Well, hello, darlings. I'm here to share with you the following fact. When given a choice, people most accurately describe the gender in one of two categories. To be clear, research studies have not always found people describing their gender beyond two categories. However, this was the case because research studies rarely allowed gender choices beyond two categories. Science is no longer assuming binary gender categories because the data are telling us otherwise. For example, Dr. Peter Smith at the Institute for Work and Health examined data taken from the 2014 Canadian Labour Force Survey, a survey composed of hundreds of thousands of people's measures of their responsibilities for taking care of children, occupations, hours of work, and levels of education. Dr. Smith's examination of these data yielded an 11-point measure of gender role, which he named the Labor Force Gender Index. The Labor Force Gender Index has a range of scores from 0 to 10, with lower scores indicating masculine gender roles and higher scores indicating feminine gender roles. Smith found women's and men's gender roles were represented across the range of Labor Force Gender Index scores. Interestingly, Smith found the same representation of gender roles when he examined the 1997 Canadian Labour Force Survey dataset, which indicates gender roles being beyond two categories has been occurring for more than 20 years and is therefore not a fad-like or generational specific phenomenon. Scientists at YouGov.com found similar results to those reported by Dr. Smith. YouGov.com scientists asked a representative sample of 1,692 Great Britons and Americans to place themselves on a scale of masculinity-femininity, where 0 is completely masculine and 6 is completely feminine. Great Britain women's and men's gender identities were represented across the 7-point range. Although not as prominent, this representation also occurred for American women's and men's gender identities. However, different from Dr. Smith's findings, YouGov.com found a participant's age affected their gender identity. Great Britons from 18 to 64 years of age best identified their genders using more than 2 categories, whereas Great Britons 65 years of age and older best identified their gender identities using 1 or 2 categories of gender. One of the more recent scientific research studies on this topic was conducted by my laboratory. We asked a convenience sample of 413 people about their gender identity by having them move a virtual lever on a true continuum. We found 55% of people identified their genders within the continuum. So now you know, gender is most accurately measured beyond 2 categories and may be best measured using continuums. Go share this newfound sexual knowledge about gender and be a part of the fight against sexual ignorance.